Hebrew structure of the text, of any Bible text, is broken both by the chapter verses as well as the Parsha divisions of the text. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Hebrew structure of Parsha Bo, which is Exodus chapter 10, verse 1 through chapter 13, verse 16. So let's hop on over to that. In Parsha Bo, we have two sections, section 6 and section 7. In section 6, we have 3 paragraphs and an epilogue. In section 7 of our text, we have 6 paragraphs and 2 appendices. So at this time, we're going to jump over and look at those different sections. In this video, I'm going to do something a little different from what I've done previously. What I'm going to do in this video is, as we look at the paragraphs, we're going to move over and read the first and last verse of each section. As we do that, you'll also be able to see how the chapters and verses break the Hebrew thought, as well as how the Parshas break the Hebrew train of thought. But the point of this video is for us to better see the Hebrew structure of this text, the literary Hebrew structure of this text. So let's go ahead and look at the next section, section 6. That section would be the plagues. It's continuing from last week's Parsha. We have 3 plagues left, and in this section, it will cover from chapter 7, verse 8 through chapter 11, verse 10. The very paragraph 8 covers the locust. The locust starts at chapter 10, verse 1 through verse 20. And new to this video, I went ahead and put the Aliyahs. So that's what A1 and A2 are here referencing to. So let's jump over to the actual text itself, and we will read verse 1 and verse 20 for your for you to be able to see it. So here we're in Parsha Bo, Aliyah 1, or Aliyah Aleph. That's chapter 10, verse 1, and it says, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Go unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart, and the heart of his servants, that I might show these my signs in the midst of them." And verse 20, which we can see jumps over to Aliyah 2, is the last verse of this paragraph. And it reads, "But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the children of Israel go." So this is the first portion of this section, or the first paragraph. The next paragraph, paragraph 9, deals with the darkness, the plague of darkness. As we can see, that's chapter 10, verse 21 through 29. And again, we see it jumps from Aliyah 2 to Aliyah 3. Let's look at that text. We can see here, it says in verse 21, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Stretch out thy hand towards heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt." And of course, as we jump back, we see it jumps to Aliyah 3. And our last verse for this train of thought is, "And Moses said, Thou hast spoken well. I will see thy face again no more." Now we're going to go back and look at the next train of thought in the Hebrew text, which is paragraph 10, according to the Hebrew. This is the warning regarding the plague of the firstborn. Now, this warning was not given to the Pharaoh, but to the children of Israel. That is in chapter 11, verse 1 through verse 8. And as we will see, it jumps from Aliyah 3 to Aliyah 4. So let's jump over to our text. We can see here Exodus chapter 1, chapter 11, verse 1. And the Lord said unto Moses, Yet one plague more will I bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterwards he will let you go hence. When he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out henceforth altogether. And we can see that it jumps over to Aliyah 4. And our last verse is 8 right here. And it says, I'm going to scroll it up to the top so you can see it right here. It says, And all thy servants shall come down unto me and bow down unto me, saying, Get thee out, and all the people that follow thee. And after that I will go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in hot anger. So we see that Aliyah 4, verse 8 is where it ends as far as this Hebrew thought goes. As I've pointed out, you can see how both the chapters and verses are breaking the actual natural flow of Hebrew as well as the Aliyahs. But let's go ahead and jump back. I'm going to leave this on the screen just a little bit so that we can, those that may be taking notes, you can pause and write this down, our different sections. We have one more section in this section, or one more portion, I'll call it. And this is the epilogue, which is chapter 11, verses 9 and 10. And of course, that's in Aliyah 4. We can see that right here. 9 and 10 actually closes out this entire section, section 6, which is the plagues. This closes the plagues. And verse 10 says, well, we might as well read just the two verses. Verses 9 says, And the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh will not hearken unto you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. And Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh. And the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the children of Israel go out of the land. So, of course, because this is two verses, we just read the entire epilogue. And if you're wondering what an epilogue is, it's kind of a summary of the section. So this is the summary of basically all the plagues. Okay? Now, let's jump back, and this ends section 6 of our Torah portion, Bo. Now we're going to jump into a new train of thought altogether, which is the Exodus from Egypt. Section 7 is the Exodus from Egypt. So all the next verses are paragraphs, could be categorized under the Exodus from Egypt. So that's from chapter 12:1 all the way to the end of the chapter at 42 for this section. Okay? Now, our first paragraph is instructions on the observance of Passover in Egypt. This is chapter 12, verse 1. Excuse me. Through verse 13. And all of this is contained in Aliyah 4. So let's look at that right quick. Chapter 12, verse 1. We can see it right here. It says, And the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, that's the beginning of this section of the text. And the last verse, and the blood shall be for you. Let me start over. Exodus 12:13, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and there shall no plague be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. So this is the very first section or first paragraph of this section, instructions on the observance of Passover in Egypt. Okay? So paragraph 2 starts in the very next verse, but it is a directive for the observance of Passover in the future. So the train of thought kind of breaks here a little bit. They're in Egypt, and Moses is now giving instructions, or God is giving instructions on how to keep the Passover in the future. So let's look at that. That's chapter 12, verses 14 through 20. So just a few small verses. And that too is in Aliyah 4. We'll go ahead and look at that. So this is paragraph 2. We're looking at verse 14. It says, "And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast and ordinance forever." So this is the command for the Passover festival or feast to be an enduring feast for all eternity. And it starts here. And of course, we're going to look at verse 12, 20. It says, "You shall eat nothing leavened in all your habitations, shall you eat nothing, you shall eat unleavened bread." Okay, so this is dealing with the future keeping of this festival. As we go back, we will see that this is the directive and observance of Passover in the future. Now, our next paragraph, the instructions are conveyed to the people, and Passover is celebrated in Egypt. So this is Exodus or Shemot chapter 12, verses 21 through 28, and this is in Aliyah 5. Now we're jumping back to our narrative. Now that we've had some instructions and different information given to us about the Passover, how to keep it, how to memorialize it in the future, now we actually have the children of Israel beginning to keep it in Egypt. And we will see this here. Let's look at the verses. That's chapter 12, verse 21. 12:21. It says, "Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, Draw out and take your lambs according to your families and kill the Passover lamb." So this is the first verse of this section, and it goes all the way to 28. So this Aliyah, which is Aliyah 5, covers this entire thought right here. "And the children of Israel went and did so as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they." So did they. This is our section that we are reading now, which is the fourth paragraph, which is the plague of the firstborn. So what we have going on is previously God has warned about the firstborn and the destruction of the firstborn. Then we have the institution of the Passover or Pesach, the Passover lamb, all of this. The children of Israel obey that. And then what we are having is a return to the death of the firstborn. That's what's happening here. So let's look at this one more time. Plague of the firstborn begins in chapter 12, verse 29 through 32. And this is contained completely in Aliyah 6. In fact, Aliyah 6 contains a lot of the next components or the next paragraphs. So let's read those few verses right there, verse 29 and verse 32. 29 says, "And it came to pass at midnight that the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, for the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle." That begins this section or this paragraph, paragraph 4, and we're looking all the way to verse 32. It says, "Take both your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also." This is the end of the 4th paragraph, which is the plague of the firstborn. Now, that leads us to the 5th paragraph, which is the preparations for the Exodus. This is chapter 12, verse 33 through 36, and Aliyah 6. Before we jump there and read that, in the previous video, I talked about how thoughts in the Torah seems to jump from thought to thought to thought to thought. And that's what we have going on here. We have an instruction, kind of some information, and then it seems to resume the story. That's what we have going on here. Now, this preparation right here, this is not a perfect timeline, is what I'm trying to say. There is a jumping back and forth in thought processes. So these paragraphs are not necessarily set in order as this is the natural progression, because a part of the preparation was them asking for silver and gold and items from the Egyptians. And that would not have been a part of like the death angels coming and then they run out and ask. This portion that we're about to look at actually happens earlier than what is in the text. So the text is jumping around and the thought processes are moving. But if you can understand these paragraphs that I'm explaining to you, it's easy to see the process uh, and kind of maneuver it around to understand that it's not in order. So I just wanted to explain that to you before we jump to it. So preparations for the Exodus, once more, that's chapter 12, verse 33 through 36. Again, this is in Aliyah 6. Let's read verse 33 and 36. Verse 33 says, "And the Egyptians were urging upon the people to send them out of the land in haste, for they said, 'We are all dead men.'" Now we got verse 36. It says, "And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have what they asked, and they despoiled the Egyptians." In other words, they took their goods. They took their goods. Now, that's the paragraph 5. The next slide is the actual Exodus, the leaving of Egypt. And that's chapter 12, verse 37 through 42. And this too is in Aliyah 6. We're going to read verses 37 and verse 42 so you'll have an idea of where one begins and one ends. So 37, I'm scrolling up just a little bit for you. It says, "And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot beside children. that begins a new thought, and that thought or paragraph ends in verse 42. It was at night of watching unto the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This same night is a night of watching unto the Lord for all the children of Israel throughout their generations. This is a complete thought, a complete paragraph of thought. Our next paragraph begins obviously in the next verse. Okay? And now, instead of it really talking about, um, the text is talking, but it's more like an appendices. We have two appendices in this section, and we're about to read the first. The appendices starts in chapter 12, verse 43, and it continues into 13:16. Okay? 13:16. Actually, that's mistyped. It's 14:16. 14:16. That's a mistype. 14:16. So 12:43 through chapter 13, chapter 14. Again, that's a typo. It should be 14:16, not 13:16. Now, let's look at our first appendices. It says the ordinance of Passover. So that starts in chapter 12, verse 43, and it goes to verse 50. This is all in Aliyah 6, as we can see here. And let's look at those two verses. We have verse 43. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall be no alien eat thereof. That's the first appendices. And that thought continues until verse 50. And it says, thus did all the children of Israel as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. So they did. So they did. That's the end of the first appendices. Now, our second appendices is the law of the firstborn. So we go from this ordinance of Passover to talking about the redemption of the firstborn, and then we are talking about a memorial of the Exodus. Now, let me get my face out of here so we can see the text, and I'll put my face up top. The law of the firstborn and a memorial to the Exodus. So this is chapter 12, verse 51, and right here is where I was talking about. It should be 14 through 16. However, our chapter breaks the Aliyah, and that's why up here in the appendices it says 13:16, is because this Parsha ends in chapter 13, verse 16. However, this thought in Hebrew continues to the next Parsha and continues all the way to chapter 14, verse 16. So we see it being broken, the natural flow and thought being broken. That's the reason for these two differences. Okay? Because this is Parsha Bo right here under appendices for this section. I ended it at chapter 13:16 because it's the end of this Parsha, but it does continue. The thought, the Hebrew thought, actually continues to chapter 14, verse 16. So next week's Parsha will resume in the appendice of this portion. Okay, so in next week's video, we'll talk about that. But here, I wanted you to understand. So what we're going to actually do here is we're going to read chapter 12, verse 51, and we will read 13:16 because that's the last of our Torah portion. I can go ahead and skip over and we can read 16 so you can see the thought. I can try that, so I'll do that for you. Let's read 12, 12:51 right now. So 12:51 says, "And it shall come to pass the selfsame day that the Lord did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their hosts." Okay, if we're going to complete the entire thought, we will go into next week's Torah portion. And it will continue all the way to next week's Torah portion. And we're going to actually, it will go all the way into the third Aliyah of next week. And it is verse 16, which says, "And lift thou up thy rod, and stretch out thy hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go in the midst of the sea on dry ground." That's a complete thought. That's the complete thought of this section right here. The law of the firstborn and a memorial to the Exodus. So the Exodus is actually occurring according to the a flow of the Hebrew. So I hope you enjoyed this. This will end this portion, this Torah portion Bo. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like the video,